The Wild Swans. In the lands between the mountains and the sea lived a king, a queen, and 11 sons. The queen went out riding through the snow on a sleigh pulled by 4 beautiful black horses. She came to a tree that had fallen across the way. When she stopped, she noticed someone was watching her. When she looked, she saw the shadow of a woman in the trees. Then the woman came out. It was a troll witch. She had very long white hair, and her eyes were icy blue. She wore a long robe made of the soft fur of rabbits. She told the queen, "You will soon have a baby girl." The queen rejoiced at the thought of having a daughter. The witch then demanded payment for this news. The queen offered gold, but the witch wanted something else. "I will have your 11 sons as my servants. This will come to pass after the baby girl is born." The queen returned to the palace, not knowing what to believe. One day the baby girl Eliza was born. All the queen could do was wonder, what if the predictions of the troll witch will come true? How everyone loved the little child. The queen had 12 spoons made, one for each son and one for the princess. As the girl grew, her brothers showered her with love and kindness. The brothers and their little sister all ate with the special spoon that the queen gave to them. Then one day, a storm rose up, unlike anyone had ever seen. The clouds were as black as coal. The wind blew until a whirlwind appeared, and among all the people gathered in the great hall, the troll witch appeared, and with a wave of her hand, a great transformation took place. The 11 brothers were turned into very large swans. The troll witch had strong magic, but the pure hearts and kindness of each prince made it so her magic did not work altogether. She wanted them to be silent, but the great swans honked as they flew. They began to fly in a large circle over the palace. The youngest prince, though now a swan, swooped down very close to Princess Eliza. The troll witch flew after them, and a great sadness fell over the kingdom. Princess Eliza, though just a little girl, was just as sad. The queen's heart was broken. Though she had a wonderful princess, she retired to her chambers and soon died. Eliza grew in the care of courtiers. The king traveled in search of a new queen. Unbeknown to him, the one he found was evil. She was mean to the little princess. On her birthday, the evil queen gave the princess a cup of sand and told her to pretend that it was her birthday cake. As Eliza grew, she became more and more beautiful. The king loved her so. This made the evil queen jealous. Without the king knowing, she sent Eliza to live with peasants out in the forest, forbidding her to return until she was 16 years old. So Eliza grew and learned the ways of a people who live in the forest. She gathered herbs and flowers. She collected mushrooms and other edibles. She learned to spin and knit and weave and sew. She knew all the birds and animals that lived around her. She was kind, and everyone that met her loved her, and oh, how she could sing. When she reached the age of 16, the peasant family brought her back to the palace. Now the evil queen thought no one else was as beautiful as the queen herself, and when she saw how everyone loved Eliza, she was very, very furious. The king wanted her with him all the time. He told her about her 11 brothers and how they had been changed into swans by an evil troll witch. The evil queen tried her magic on Princess Eliza. It did not work. No matter what evil trick the queen tried, Eliza was so pure and so innocent that no evil magic worked on her. The queen sent poison frogs to the princess, but when Eliza looked upon them, each frog turned into a beautiful red poppy. Finally, the queen took walnut juice and stained Eliza's face. She tangled up her hair and stained all of her clothes. When the king saw her, he was shocked. He could not believe that this was his daughter. The queen then turned her out of the castle with nothing more than her spoon and demanded she never return. Eliza walked into the forest, and with nothing except her clothes on her back and the silver spoon her mother had given her. She walked to a spring and then cleaned off the stains from her face and clothes. She had walked until she came to the family of peasants that had cared for her as a child. She told them everything. Then she told them she must somehow save her brothers. She began to walk through the forest. The birds sang to her. The squirrels whistled. Butterflies flew all around her. She was alone, but not afraid. She knew that she must find the 11 swans. As she walked, she came upon a well-worn trail. She followed it until it came to a small cabin. Outside the cabin was a garden of herbs. Tending it was an old woman. After some very polite greetings, Eliza asked her if she knew of a place where she might find 11 swans. The kind old woman told her of a lake nearby. She thanked her and followed her directions. She began to walk towards a lake where she hoped the swans might come. She walked along the beach and saw places where many birds had been. All day she walked around the lake hoping to see the swans. Just as the sun began to set, she heard a clamoring in the distance. Then in the last bit of daylight, she saw the silhouettes of swans in the sky. Eliza hid in the bushes. The swans landed in the water very close to the beach. They came out of the water, shaking the water from their feathers. Eliza watched them preen and fuss as swans do. When the sun was fully set, an amazing transformation occurred. Suddenly, there were no longer swans, but 11 princes. Eliza was frightened at first, but she recognized them. They truly were her brothers. She shyly walked out from her hiding place. At first, the brothers did not recognize her. In her hand, she held out the silver spoon. Each of the brothers had one just like it. The youngest prince was the first one to cry out, "It's our sister Eliza!" The brothers took her to a cabin hidden in the forest nearby. They told her of their plight. They had to fly all day as great swans and do the troll witch's bidding. Then at night they became the princes again. Eliza told them of the evil queen and all she had done. The brothers promised to take her far away. They told her after 2 more days they would fly across the ocean and carry her on their wings. They talked all night, but when the sun began to light the sky, the brothers changed back into the swans, and off they flew. The youngest brother stayed for a while, keeping her company, but alas, he too was under the spell of the witch and had to fly. Eliza walked through the forest gathering nuts and other foods. She prepared a feast for her brother's return. At evening time, the swans returned, and the brothers were so happy to have such a wonderful feast. They thanked Eliza, and soon they all slept. At daybreak, the brothers were once again swans, and they flew off, the youngest one staying close by as long as he could. Eliza walked off into the forest. She was surprised to meet the kind old woman that had helped her find the swans. Eliza told her of the evil troll witch and her brother's plight, and how she would do anything to save her brothers. The old woman told her there was a way, but it was very hard and painful. Eliza was determined to help her brothers. The old woman told her she must find the plant known as the stinging nettle. She must beat the plant and take the fibers and spin them into linen thread and weave the linen thread into cloth and make each of her brothers a shirt. But that was not all. She must not talk or laugh, sing, or even dance until all 11 shirts had been completed. Eliza knew it would be hard and that it would take a long time, but she must do this to save her brothers. She thanked the old woman and began to search for the plant she needed. That evening, when the brothers returned, they found her working furiously. They asked her what she was doing. She said nothing, but her eyes told them much. All night she prepared. She had the tools she needed to make the shirt. She had the painfully gathered stinging nettle plants. And in the morning, her brothers once again became swans, and they lifted her up, and off they flew across the ocean. The trip across the ocean would take 2 days. The brothers had flown this way before. They knew they must make it to a small island before the sun set, or they would all fall into the sea. They flew on. The sun began to set. They saw the island in the distance. They flew on, just making it there in time. The brothers, swans no longer, held tight to Eliza. The island was very small, so small there was barely enough room for the 12 of them. A storm began to blow. The rain began to fall. They all stood together in the wind and rain with no shelter. All night they were shivering, soaking wet. When the sun rose, once again the brothers were swans, and they lifted Eliza up, and off they flew. All day they flew, and finally, just a bit before sunset, they arrived in a wonderful new land. The brothers had been here before. It was far enough away from the troll witch that she could not command them, but still her evil spell kept them swans by day and princes by night. They knew of a cave where Eliza could live and be safe. The next morning they flew off again. Eliza found stinging nettles and began her work. They stung her hands when she picked them, but when dry, she worked on the plants without the pain. Each day she was able to make a part of a shirt, first the sleeve, then the back, and finally the front. She worked day and night, rarely stopping to sleep or eat. Each evening her brothers returned, and they made sure she had something to eat. They knew she was doing something to help them, but she would not tell them. One day while the brothers were gone, she heard the sound of a hunting horn. She watched as a king and his hunters approached. The hunters found her and called to the king. When he saw her, he was amazed at her beauty, even though she was dressed as a peasant. He talked to her, but she made no reply. The king was filled with compassion for her. The look on her face told the king that she was no mere peasant. He ordered his hunters to gather up her things and bring her back to the palace. At first she did not want to go, but they let her take all of her work, so she was finally willing to go. When they arrived at the palace, the courtiers frowned and stuck up their noses at this peasant girl. The king had her treated like royalty. Wonderful clothes and food were brought to her in the king's finest guest chambers. Yet she spoke to no one. Rumors began to circulate that she was a witch. Court spies began to watch her every move. One night she ran out of nettles, and so she snuck out of the palace. She found some nettles nearby. One of the court spies saw her collecting. Soon even more people thought she was a witch. What was she doing with the stinging nettles? The king visited her every day. He asked her what she was making. She did not reply. The king sent a jester, and she watched his antics but did not laugh. The king sent musicians, and they played music that would make anyone dance, but not Eliza. She just kept working on the shirts. The court spies began to think that the king was bewitched by her. They plotted against her. Eliza kept working day and night. She had 10 shirts finished, and the last one started. Her brothers knew where she was, but did not dare enter the castle. Each evening, she would go out of her chambers onto a balcony. The 11 swans flew overhead. She waved to them, and the swans thought she was safe. Once again, she ran out of nettles. That night she went out again. This time, the only place she could find nettles was in the graveyard. People in this land believed that no one went to the graveyard at night except a witch. The court spy saw her there. This was the final straw. Upon hearing about her visit to the graveyard, the king too believed she was a witch. They had a trial. She was brought before the king in his court. They asked her many questions, but she did not answer. She kept working on the last shirt. So the court decided she must be burned as a witch. They took her back to her chambers. She worked furiously on the last shirt. It still needed one more sleeve. The guards came and tried to take her. She struggled with them, pointing at the shirts. They allowed her to take the shirts with her. Out in the courtyard, a great pile of wooden sticks had been piled. The king and queen arrived to watch the spectacle. The guards lit the fire and were about to throw Eliza onto the pile. Suddenly, a great clamoring and honking was heard by all. In the sky, 11 great swans flew into the courtyard. They flew right up to Eliza, and with their loud honking and gigantic wings flapping, they chased the guards away from her. She threw the finished shirts onto 10 of the swans. The last one, though, unfinished, she threw over the youngest swan. Suddenly the spell was broken. The king and queen and all the rest of the court were in awe of all they saw. There stood 11 princes guarding Eliza. They told the king of what had happened to them and how Eliza had saved them. Eliza could now speak, and she thanked the king for being so kind to her. They all lived happily ever after, except the youngest brother. His shirt was missing a sleeve, so he had a swan's wing for an arm.